could drop a pin and you would have heard it. I've never heard New York City like that before. There was absolutely no sound, no traffic. Everyone had evacuated, and no, it was an amazing thing to serve my brothers and sisters. It was a radical way for first responders to unify above all the horror and death and destruction, and it was a spiritual experience down there.
We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers, stronger than...
I am so excited and deeply grateful to have such an inspiring and impactful guest on the show today. Nina, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you. Thanks
So
for
before
having
we dive deep into the topics of trauma, mental health, and your story, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am a psychiatrist, board certified psychiatrist. I have a private practice in Greenwich Village for the past almost 35 years. And I'm also a trauma, terrorist, mass shooting expert.
Thank you.
I'm also clinical assistant professor of the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. I teach Mount Sinai residents long-term psychotherapy for many years now.
When I read your biography, what caught my eye the most was that you were a first responder at the World Trade Center on 9/11. So how did that happen? Were you already there and you just acted, or were you consciously deciding to go there and to help them? And if it was the second, what gave you the courage to risk your own life to help others?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. I actively chose to go down there. It was very much a decision. I had actually packed a knapsack with food and water and blankets if there was any people that had survived down there, which at that point there was no survivors. And I know I made a conscious decision to go down and to help my fellow brothers and sisters. And for me, it was reflex. I have always identified with people who are in need, who are vulnerable, and I knew I could help, and I did help many people down there. And I had to go through checkpoints because at that point they had closed off Soho, and the only time I really processed any fear was at that point, because Soho was basically a ghost town. There was no one in Soho, and that was the only time I felt like, wow, what am I doing here? Because you could drop a pin and you would have heard it. I've never heard New York City like that before. There was absolutely no sound, no traffic. Everyone had evacuated, and no, it was an amazing thing to serve my brothers and sisters. It was a radical way for first responders to unify above all the horror and death and destruction. And it was a spiritual experience down there, very much so.
I admire you so much for that. And you can be so proud of yourself that you had this courage and that you kind of like felt this calling to help others. That's like very, very brave of you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it was an amazingly unifying, bonding experience to have with other first responders, firemen, policemen, construction workers. And then initially when I was down there, we were moving debris. Someone handed me work gloves. It was raining ash. I don't remember even the color of the ash, but someone had handed me work gloves and a mask, a surgical mask. And we started just spontaneously forming a bucket brigade and removing debris and handing the debris down the line in an attempt to look for any survivors. And unfortunately, there weren't any survivors. And then eventually, much later on in the day, spontaneously, doctors that had gone down there, I was the only psychiatrist at that point down there, but we formed a ad hoc unit. So we were treating medically and psychiatrically first responders who were having a hard time dealing with the trauma, and also family members that had gotten down there. that were having a hard time dealing with the trauma.
Wow. I'm sure those pictures that you saw that day, though, like they follow you like for weeks, months, like in your dreams. And how, if not even a lifetime, how did what you experienced on that day, how did this impact your mental health?
So I developed breast cancer from being a first responder down there, and I had a mastectomy in 2017. They say that many people also have respiratory symptoms, so it did affect my health going down there. I'll always have the memory, and it will always be a trauma that I process. I mean, I have chronic nightmares of planes flying into buildings. I have thoughts during the day of it. Yeah, that trauma will always be with me, but the positive aspect of me helping other people will also be there. So, and that's it was quite a spiritual experience and an incredibly loving experience as well, where first responders came together to really rise above all the hatred, destruction, death, suffering, loss, and help other first responders.
Wow. I can't even imagine. So I applaud you truly. What helped you to overcome that trauma to, like, I'm sure like at some point, like of course the pictures will always stay with you, and I'm certain that certain emotions will always be followed those pictures, but I'm sure you kind of managed to calm your nervous system a little bit from the point from 2011 till now, and certain practices maybe that helped you to be the woman that you are today and to have the strength also to help others again.
So yes, basically I survived 2 terrorist attacks. So I developed breast cancer from being a first responder at 9/11. And then I chose consciously to go into the second Chechen war, which is Chechnya is a part of Russia. And in 1991, Putin waged the first Chechen war, and I went in 2005 during the second Chechen war. And I helped provide medical psychiatric care to the Chechens that were suffering. It was basically a genocide. So basically what Putin has done in Ukraine, he did in Chechnya, he did in Georgia, he did in Syria, and now he's doing in Ukraine. So during my time providing medical and psychiatric care to Chechens that were being slaughtered, basically Putin killed over 100,000, probably 200,000 Chechens. I was poisoned by an FSB agent, a Russian FSB agent, and I almost died there. So that was a very dramatic experience. And I almost died in Chechnya. Doctors Without Borders had been there, and they left because a female physician had been abducted and killed. So I was the only international doctor that was there, and I lived in a liminal space for 3 years. When I came back, I had pneumonia probably over 200 times. I had GI parasitic infections for about 15 years. I developed 20 food allergies, which changed over the years, and a chronic autoimmune disorder. So that also has been a lot to process, not just medically, but also psychologically. But what happened was, ironically, that I had a spiritual awakening, and that as sick as I was, I found joy, I found harmony, I found that basically, I think I was poisoned with man-made anthrax as my best medical guess, but anthrax humanized me and laid me low. It taught me how to slow down and not push myself. I had been a super achiever, always pushing my body. Before I went to Chechnya, I was an elite endurance athlete. I had actually won some half marathons in the Great Wall of China and had placed second in the Kurt Steiner. It was a 34-mile race in New York City overall. Yeah, so that also was taken from me. But what I was gifted with was that I found my humanity in other people's humanity and this incredible sense of joy and harmony, which I hadn't had before. So that was the irony of becoming sick.
What helped you to always keep going? Because you had so many challenges, like cancer, terrorist attack, poison, like so many things. And there are other people who are like, have certain things, let's say just quote unquote cancer, and they just kind of like have a mindset of like, I'm giving up. I won't be able to make it. I can't. And you are like, despite so many adversities, you have a positive mindset. You always kept going. What gave you the strength?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always have been a fighter. I am the hardest worker in the room. I've always been very tenacious. And I think I was just born with that I would do whatever I could for other people or myself to help them. And I think also by becoming really sick, almost dying, I had to really slow down and become much more aware of myself and my tendency to perform and do. And I had to learn how to be. And I developed a spiritual practice where I meditated every day. I I became much more mindful of myself and how I am interconnected with everyone in the world, and how what I do or don't do really has ramifications, which everyone does. And what all of our actions has ramifications. And even if it's just a teardrop in an ocean, it still makes a difference.
Beautiful. You mentioned your spiritual awakening, and I read somewhere that it was even linked with a whale. So would you tell
Yes.
us what exactly happened, what you experienced, and then also how does spirituality, like what does it add to your life?
I would love to share my experience with Molly. So I've come to call this wild gray whale that I had an encounter with in Laguna Beach in 2012, Molly. So in 2012, it was really at the epiphany. It was 7 years. I had this spiritual awakening and spiritual education, really. And I met Molly for the first time. I was paddleboard surfing in Laguna Beach, California. And I decided to take a lesson. My lesson was he was a nature photographer, professional nature photographer. So he had a camera, underwater camera as well. And we took off on the Pacific Ocean. That day, it was so still. The ocean was like a sheet of glass. And I took to my paddleboard and we went out really, really far. We went out so far that we could see whale watching boats, and we could see gray whales spouts of when they come up to gasp air, they spout water up through their blowhole, and we saw that. And when we were coming back, this magnificent gray whale who weighed 60 tons, who was pregnant because my instructor told me she looked like she was pregnant, spy hopped me, which is when a whale comes up horizontally out of the water. It pokes its head and in this case, 2/3 of her body in front of me. They don't know why whales do that. They think it's to look, to orient themselves as they migrate down to Baja California, which is where she was going, and to basically deliver her baby. Excuse me. And it was the most magnificent experience I've ever had. She looked me dead in the eye when she came up out of the water. Her left eye held and contained me like no other living being had. And she really challenged me to reconsider my life, any living life. And she was the most wise, loving, nurturing entity that I've ever been, had an encounter with or been around. And she really challenged me to reconsider my perception of living life. She was incredibly mindful not to dislodge me from my paddleboard, because it was the first time I had been paddleboard surfing and I was a little shaky. She actually came 15 feet from me, spy hopped me, and then my instructor was off about 50 feet away, and then she came up again 30 feet away, and he said how lucky I was that this has never happened, and that whales often don't come that close to human beings spy hopping. But I knew it had nothing to do with luck that day. I had beckoned her, she had beckoned me, and I felt we had lived many lifetimes in the past, and she was my mystical mother, and she was beckoning me to conserve my energy. I had started writing my book, and she was beckoning me to go deeper with my thoughts and my feelings with my book. And it was the most magnificent experience I've ever had. She was fat and womb-like and nurturing. I felt a kinship with her. I felt an attunement with her. And she taught me, you can be big. You don't have to be small. You can make a splash. And that so touched me. I had really grown up in a family where I was marginalized and criticized a lot, and was taught never to express my thoughts or make room for myself. And here was this ancient creature. Whales are a symbol of our ancient society and knowledge. I also think they carry the Akashic records, which is all of our lifetimes. And I feel like they're here to promote our spiritual entities. And she did all that in literally 30 seconds. It was this corrective emotional experience that I could listen, feel, and think in a very different way.
And what changed after that?
I felt much more energized to write my book. I felt nurtured. I felt seen. I felt held. I felt contained. I felt reassured that I was always loved and seen and held by the universe. And that's everything. Because before, I felt like I didn't really matter. I think I felt worthless. I felt invisible. I was very much marginalized growing up. This taught me that I was loved and embraced. And I had always been. So that's everything.
Beautiful. Amazing. Yeah, I can really resonate. And I think nature is just one of the most magnificent ways to connect with a higher power. Like, I feel like all the abundance, all the wisdom, like you see it in nature. And I find nature just such a beautiful reminder of how expansive also our life can be.
Yes. No, it was amazing. Here was this gray whale, and whales have been hunted and killed by human beings, and I believe in the collective unconscious, and that very much is in their collective unconscious. And here is this magnificent gray pregnant whale coming to meet me and have an encounter with me. And she was mindful to 15 feet. She came up for me. There are whale experts who say to be within closer than 10 feet is too overwhelming and it's terrifying. And she had this mindfulness to keep enough space from me to come up and greet me and encounter me and not scare me. And I was gobsmacked. It altered my life. I mean, this Molly, my whale that I've come to call Molly, was just this magnificent, loving, accepting, embracing, nurturing being. And I felt this immediate kinship. I should also mention, I forgot to mention this, that I had been born legally blind in my right eye. So I primarily used unifocal vision to see. Most humans see bifocally. And whales, similar to me, use unifocal vision. And I felt like she was saying, this is okay. It's okay. Her left eye, I only saw the left side of her body and her face, and her left eye was this walnut size. It was so wise and so intelligent and had so much love and creativity in it. And I felt like she was saying it's okay. I think it was hard for my mother to accept that I was legally blind in my right eye. So I think that because of that, in part, I felt a little defective. And I felt like here was this reaffirming, magnificent being saying, hey, it's okay.
You're beautiful just the way you are.
Yes.
Amazing.
Exactly. Yes.
Amazing. Was it also like your approach is very unique when you're working with your patients because you have all the psychiatrist tools and practices, but you're combining them with spirituality. Was it after that incident that you got inspired to merge these two?
Definitely. So, as a result of my getting sick and my spiritual awakening and my encounter with Molly, I very much changed the practice of how I practice psychiatry with my patients. And I felt that it deepened my connections with them. In some patients, it actually allowed us to bypass impasses that had developed in the clinical dyad in our therapeutic relationship. And some of my patients were able to find, also similar to me, more meaning in their life. They became better able to be and not super perform and do. They developed interests that allow them to be more interconnected with other people. And I can give specific examples if you want, but it very much changed my practice in terms of not only how I saw the world and my spiritual awakening, but with my patients as well. Yes.
What are some practices or tools that you are using?
So, very much mindfulness tools. So meditating, I meditate every day, deep breathing, just trying to slow down and be more cognizant and just to be aware and to just be, not to do. These are all practices that we can all do. I've always been an athlete, so for me, also running is a very spiritual practice, especially if I can run in nature. That's always very healing. And if I'm struggling with finding words, it always comes to me when I run or I walk in nature. I think being in nature, even if you're just sitting in nature, it's incredibly healing. And these are all practices that everyone can do, that we all have at our fingertip, that doesn't cost us any money. And I recommend everyone to meditate if they can. I know some people have a hard time sitting and quieting their mind, but even if their mind is rushing, you can just notice the thoughts, and it is difficult to still yourself. And I certainly have a hard time with that because I'm a very dynamic person that likes to move and do things, but just sitting is so healing. I believe that through meditation, I basically shrunk my cancer so that it was stage 1A, and they had found on an MRI that 3/4 of my breast had been affected by the cancer. And I believe I meditated for like a month 5 or 6 hours a day. It was very intense. And I believe through meditation, I actually shrunk the involvement of my breast cancer in my breast. So it's tremendously healing. Also, just so healing emotionally as well. All these mindfulness practices.
Absolutely, yes. And it also I think also physically it just does so much because it really calms the nervous system. And especially after traumatic experiences, we're stuck in this flight mode, and our nervous system is just constantly in this flight mode. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, to get it back in a neutral state where it can be, if we're exposed to fear, be in this fight or flight mode. But then actually, whenever we're safe again, that we feel safe.
Right. Definitely. I think that if you can still yourself, it's a way to heal our body, our minds. It is limitless potential to heal. And I've seen amazing things with healing, with mindfulness practices. And I think that I wouldn't be here today. I don't think I would have survived if I hadn't had this spiritual awakening, and if I hadn't had this mindfulness practice. It saved my life. Yes.
Beautiful. Would you say, for somebody listening or watching right now who also went through a traumatic experience, no matter if it's a small trauma or a big one, but they all impact us tremendously, especially if they're in our childhood, would you also say that starting to meditate is your recommendation, or what would your recommendation be for that person to take a step towards healing?
Yeah. So I think for anyone that's been traumatized, and I think living our world is traumatizing. Birth, being born is traumatic. That if you can slow down to process the trauma, if you can begin to slow down to process your emotions, which these are all very difficult things with trauma, because trauma memory, and this is all in my book, it's stored in different areas in our brain and different pathways in our brain. So when you have a significant trauma, memory is not stored in the prefrontal cortex, which is the front of our brain. It's stored in the amygdala. And usually trauma memory is retained visually, so that we don't have words connected to it. So in order to work through trauma, the first thing you have to do is remember it. So also trauma memory is fragmented. It defies time. It might feel like you're living the trauma in the present and in the past, all at the same time. And you have to really slow down to begin to put the pieces of the memory of the trauma together, because it is stored in a fragmented way. And then to begin to process your emotions with that trauma and begin to find the words to associate to expressing what happened and how you feel about it. And in my mind, this is how I look at my life and my patient's life. I feel that trauma is an opportunity for us to grow, to learn, to be more expansive, to challenge ourselves, to be more interconnected with other people. And if we can use the trauma as something to learn from and grow from and expand ourselves, it can be a gift. And this is essentially what my book's about, that my having breast cancer, my being poisoned by an FSD agent, these were all incredible gifts that allowed me to grow and expand and to learn about aspects of myself that had been shut down from childhood, and that I could open up and expand and write a book and grow and learn from and be more loving and nurturing, not only to my fellow human beings, but to myself. and that I learned that I counted, that I'm loved, that I matter. And I think anyone who has a trauma can learn these things too, and it can better you. So if you can look at it as a gift and grow from it, it can be an incredibly beautiful experience, paradoxically.
Yeah, perspective is everything, absolutely.
Yes.
And only through experiencing that trauma and like all the emotion linked and like the challenges to go through that trauma and heal from it, you probably like develop such empathy to your patients that you would have never had before.
Yes, definitely. I think I learned more how to embrace my humanity and other people's humanity, and that we're all here to love and assist each other, and we need to help each other. There's so much violence in America, and I feel it's an indication of the spiritual crisis in our world that we're so divisive and divided, and we can't listen to each other, especially if we disagree. And how do we come together more and listen, especially if someone has a differing opinion, because that can grow and expand you interpersonally more. But if you're shut down and rigid and brittle and can't listen, you're never going to expand yourself or grow. And these are all issues that I think we're struggling with in America. I've studied mass shooters, and I feel like many of the mass shooters in our country are people that are marginalized. They are ostracized. Often they're bullied and abused as children. And then on top of it, they have undiagnosed psychiatric illness, serious psychiatric illness. Often they're psychotic, homicidal, suicidal, and often they're given a gun, bought a gun by parents. And it's this perfect storm for them to show a lesson, which is what the Oxford High School shooter said, how alone everyone is. Because as a 15-year-old kid, you don't have any other perspective. This is all he knew, which was abandonment, betrayal, neglect, marginalization, being bullied and ostracized. And how do we just reach out and show kindness to people, especially that are marginalized and bullied, which is what my life has been about, trying to help people that are on the fringes of society and that need help.
Yeah, I also deeply believe that, yes, we do need political, economical solutions in the world, but I believe what's missing currently and what will be kind of like the missing puzzle piece to really create a better world is a spiritual solution too. And I think it just takes that we all understand that we're all one, that only if we unite and see in the other kind of like the same as us, and whatever triggers us in the other is a piece that we're abandoning within us, that only if we start to raise that level of consciousness collectively, that is the key to a better world.
Absolutely. I think what we do or don't do has ramifications, and there's a TED Talk on that, and it's the title is "I Was Almost a School Shooter" by Aaron Stark, and he talks about how he grew up in a family that was constantly dislocated, and he moved constantly. He didn't have like proper clothing, and he didn't have proper food, and was bullied and made fun of in high school. And he sounded like he was depressed. He was suicidal, as many of these mass shooters are. And he bought a gun, and he was going to go to his high school and retaliate for how he was being treated. And he went next door to say goodbye to his one friend. His one friend just looked in his eyes and said, "Wait, something's not right. You need to come in, have something to eat." And just showed him human kindness, human concern, human connectedness. And that kindness, that act of love, changed his plan to be a school shooter. And this is things we can all do that can make a difference in someone's life. If someone's being bullied, or if someone's homeless, just smiling or saying hello or how are you, having a conversation with them can change their day. It can change someone from planning to be a school shooter or homicidal or even suicidal. So it's so important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. And that story is so empowering and really shows, sometimes like if we look at the world, we feel like we can't make a change, we can't do anything. But there in that story, we see that literally every act and every single act of kindness, as you say, but then also just like literally what we do within our surrounding does have an impact, a huge impact, and that we like literally anybody of us can change the world.
Absolutely. In my mindfulness practice, I meditate and I send love and light to people in Gaza. I send love and light to people in Ukraine. I focus on people that are struggling. I'll say prayers for my patients that are struggling with medical illness or psychological illness. And I believe all of this is ways to help humanity and that it matters. And just random acts of kindness totally can make a difference in someone's life, and it's free. All these things are free. It doesn't cost any money, and it helps us as well. I found that my helping other people tremendously helped me. Not that that was the reason why I did it, but that I benefited the most. And if you can truly give to other people, I think that's the biggest gift you can give to yourself.
Yes. Yes. For anybody who would like to get in touch with you or also read your book, like where can we find you? How can we get in touch with you? Where can we get your book?
Yeah. So I have a website, which is www.ninacerfoliomd.com. And you can contact me there via email. And my book, which is Psychoanalytic and Spiritual Perspectives on Terrorism, Desire for Destruction. It is a mouthful. The publishers, which was Routledge, it's an academic publisher, wouldn't let me change the title to just Desire for Destruction. So I have to say the whole name. But if you remember Desire for Destruction, it is on Amazon. If you go onto Amazon and type in my name, Nina Cerfolio, Desire for Destruction, you can buy it. And I would love for people to leave a review, because I feel that the message of my book is that we all matter, we all count. And if you're suffering from hearing voices telling you to kill, if you're suffering with suicidal ideations, having thoughts of killing yourself, or if you're having thoughts of killing other people in terms of retaliating, I urge that you seek out psychiatric care. And I know that sometimes it's very hard to find psychiatrists that aren't totally full, but these are things that are treatable. You can get rid of hearing voices and psychoses with medication, and there are new medications that aren't that sedating, that have less side effects than the old antipsychotic medications, and that there is hope, and that there are people that want to help you like myself, and that you can get help and you can empower yourself not to suffer with these symptoms. And it's so important to reach out to family members to get help, to reach out to friends to get help, to reach out to psychiatrists to get help. And yes, if I can help one person through my book, it's worth the huge effort of that it was for a year and 6 months, 6 to 8 hours of writing. And that's why I wrote it. I wrote it for people who are struggling to get help and to know that there is always hope, no matter how down you feel, no matter how sick you are, no matter how close you are to death. And I almost died. For 3 years, I really was closer to death than life. But I had this spiritual awakening, which was my gift. And that's true for anyone, not just for me.
And I really believe that there's always a bigger plan. And no matter how much suffering we all experience, there's always light at the other side. And we're always meant to learn through that, and then mostly share that with others and help others, because only if we walk that path, we have the empathy, the knowledge, and kind of the drive and passion to help others with exactly the same situation.
Exactly. Yes. And It's so important not to isolate yourself. So many of the domestic mass shooters that I studied, all of them, I would say, I hate to say all, but the majority were isolated. And isolation is so profoundly stifling in so many ways, not just emotionally and psychologically, but physically and mentally. And, with the pandemic, with COVID and these wars, I think that people have been shut down more in their homes and isolated. And it's so important not to allow this to happen, that if you can reach out to other people and connect with them, that this is how we're all going to heal. It's not possible to heal in a vacuum. And that there are people that care, like me and you, and that people want to help. There are people who want to help you, and you just have to find them. But they're out there. So yeah, it's isolation. And Hannah Arendt talked about that, which is isolation is how we lose our political power, how we are controlled by fascist governments, how we can't think anymore. It's so damaging to our growth and our ability to think and our ability to empower ourselves, to learn. And when we're isolated, bad things happen. And so it's so important, if you can, to find a way, even if it's connection to nature or connection to an animal, to find a way to be more connected and involved in the world.
Yeah, we all need each other. And it's actually not a sign of weakness to say, I need you, I need help, but actually a sign of strength. And once we understand that it's fully okay that we need each other and that we're dependent on each other, and that actually has a beauty in it, that we are this intricate web with each other, then I think then life just gets easier.
Yes, I think that most of us, especially women, have been taught not to ask for things and not have a voice and to please other people. And it's a lifelong lesson for me to ask people for help. And people do want to help. Not everyone, but there are people that want to help. And you have to hear the no to be able to hear the yes. And to be able to receive, which is still a lesson that I'm learning. I think it's hard for me to receive and to accept help, but I've learned that I can ask people for help, and that it's okay, and that it's okay to have a voice as well. And it's important to have a voice. That my voice, I hope, will, if it helps one person, then it's worth all the effort. So
it will, for sure. Nina, thank you so much for your time. You're truly such a role model and such a example of what it means to face so many adversities and challenges, but never ever give up, and always keep a positive mindset, a positive outlook on life, and then use all of this to help others. You're truly an inspiration. So please keep shining your light. And thank you so much for the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be on with you, and I appreciate all the beautiful things you said and all the great work that you do, and let's keep it going.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would love to connect with you on a more personal level on Instagram @EmpoweringVibes, where you will receive daily inspiration and more insights on how you can turn your dreams into reality. If you want to dive even deeper into becoming your best self and you would like my support, check out my website, empoweringvibes.com. Be sure to subscribe to Empowering Vibes so you don't miss a single episode. And if you like the show, share it with someone who's looking to live an extraordinary life. Thank you so much for being part of this beautiful community. I'm sending you so much love and a big, big hug. And never forget to shine your light.